Hello everybody, welcome to Saturday the 10th of December, to be precise. Christmas, 2 weeks tomorrow. Holidays start for us, school finishes on Friday this week. So yeah, all exciting times. Went to a kids party this morning with my kids, obviously. I didn't just turn up randomly at someone else's kids party, that would be very weird. And got wrapped in toilet roll as part of the fun and games, part of the indignity of being a parent, completely wrapped head to toe in toilet roll. And just thinking all the time, wow, this is great. This is exactly what I signed up for. But I managed to survive. I made it out of there. And back to you for the next instalment of The Fury. We are in the last 100 pages now, and there is a rift opening up at Furyville, as it's now called. Brick changed the name from Fursville to Furyville, and Rilke is convinced that what's happening to them is a purge of humanity. She thinks that she is part of a plague, I guess, that will eventually wipe humanity from the face of the earth, because she's quite a bitter person. And everyone else is basically just worried about how they're going to survive because they've got no food. And I think that's kind of where we were when we left it. So the next chapter is Cal's. And we shall start today with him. So I hope you're sitting comfortably. And we shall begin. Cal, Furyville, 3:42 p.m. "We have to deal with the food situation first," said Cal. "We can't do anything if we're starving to death." They were back at the carousel, although nobody was sitting on the horses. Daisy and Adam were walking between Angie, Geoffrey and Wonky Butt the Wonderhorse with piles of dog biscuits cupped in their hands. The rest of them, apart from Marcus, who was still messing around at the back of the park, were perched on the rusted metal steps, enjoying the shade of the half-disintegrated canopy. The air smelled of sea salt and sweat. "Amen to that," said Chris. "I'm going to waste away if we don't get something soon." "Yeah, somehow I don't see that happening," said Brick, nodding at the fold visible beneath Chris's t-shirt. "It's a water retention," he replied, blushing. "No, actually, it's in my jeans. No, hang on, wait, it's none of your bloody business." "Seriously, guys," said Cal, feeling an uncomfortable tickle of impatience in the vast emptiness of his stomach. The Weetabix he'd eaten had done nothing to fill him up, and the prospect of going all night without eating was making him nervous. "We need to think of something. Any ideas?" "Yeah, I think maybe not running around like crazy people using up all our energy might be sensible," said Jade. Her eyes were red again, like she'd been crying, but she managed a gentle smile. "Fair point," said Cal. "We need to find a way to get Rilke out of her rat hole," said Brick. "I'm serious, we should light a fire outside the restaurant. She'd have to come out." "Look, forget about her," said Cal. "You really don't want to make her angry. She's still got the gun." "And who brought the gun, genius?" "I'm not saying you can't get back at her, Brick," Cal said, "but we need to think about food first, or none of us are going to be able to do anything." Cal's gut gurgled, loud enough for Daisy to turn and laugh. She held out the dog biscuits. "Do you want to try these?" "I might come to that," he thought, saying, "No thanks, Daisy. They might make me grow a tail." She laughed and went back to her game, Adam following her around the carousel like a shadow. "You leave any food in your car?" Brick asked. Cal shook his head. "Nah, we brought it all. We've got to think of something else. You know the area, Brick. Can you think of anywhere we might be able to get supplies?" "Well, there's an ocean right there," he said, "if anyone knows how to fish." Nobody responded, which was answer enough. Even if they managed to catch anything, Cal wouldn't have a clue how to take its scales off and pull its guts out, or whatever you had to do to make sure they weren't poisonous. And Hemsby's about a mile off. Plenty of chip shops. Probably won't be more than, I don't know, a couple of thousand people there this time of year. Couple of thousand feral, screaming, punching, biting, stomping people. They wouldn't last 5 seconds in a place like that. Cal sighed, kicking out at the steps hard enough to make the entire platform rattle. "Come on, guys, this is serious. If we can't get food, then we're going to die here." "We could always eat fatty," Brick said, looking at Chris. Cal had to stop himself leaping up the steps and thumping the guy square in the mouth. He waited for the anger to fizzle away before speaking. "Is there a supermarket or anything nearby? A shop we could break into after dark?" "There's another garage about a mile inland," Brick mumbled, almost reluctantly, "but it's open 24 hours. That's where I nearly got it the first time. There's a Sainsbury's too, but there's always people in there. They stack the shelves at night. My brother used to work at the one in Norwich before he joined up." "That it?" "That's it. This isn't London, Callum. This is the arse end of Norfolk. What did you expect?" Cal shook his head. He wasn't sure what he'd expected. It wasn't like he'd ever been in this situation before. He tried to remember the ride up with Daisy in the car. They had to have passed something. Hang on, he said. What about the factory, the one you can see from here? That place? They make fertiliser or something. You going to eat that? Well, they might have a cafe there, said Chris, shrugging. Yeah, they'll have a canteen if it's a big place, Jade added. My old man worked in a car plant. Took me for lunch there sometimes if I wasn't at school. Chips and beans, still my favourite meal in the world. Someone else's stomach rumbled. But there's no way we're getting in, said Brick. There's a security guard, probably more than one. Cal swore, dropping his head into his hands. I'm telling you, Brick went on, we have to force Rilk to come out, and then we can get our supplies back. What, a few bags of sour mix and crisps? Cal snapped back. Yeah, that'll keep us going for a couple of months. I really think the factory could work, said Jade. Think about it. If there's, a couple of guys looking after the place at night, then we could distract them while somebody else goes in to look for food. Distract them, said Chris. How do we do that? We just have to get close, said Cal. Then we'll trigger them. They'll chase us. That does not sound like fun, said Chris. But we could take the car, said Cal, standing up, already excited, stop outside the gates until we hook them, and then drive fast enough to stay away, but slow enough to pull them along. We could be in and out in a few minutes if we can find the cafe or whatever. He looked at Jade and she shrugged. Chris was shaking his head, but he was licking his lips too. Brick's face was as hard as his name, his eyes glowering. Brick? Said Cal. I don't know. It's too dangerous. We should give it a few days. Think about it. We don't have a few days, said Cal. Tomorrow. We should do it then. It's Sunday tomorrow. There'll be nobody there. I hate to break it to you, Cal, said Jade, but tomorrow is Monday. If we're going to do this, we need to do it now. Now, he said. And suddenly the idea of leaving Fursville and breaking into a factory seemed utterly ridiculous, completely impossible. Maybe you're right, Brick. Maybe we should think about it some more. You think? Said Brick, flapping his arms and making chicken noises. Not such a tough guy now, are you? Cal took a step towards the bigger boy, his fist bunched. Go He never got the chance to finish, as the top of the carousel exploded, sparks flying from the rows of broken bulbs. Cal ducked down, shrapnel slicing through the hot air, stinging his skin like mosquito bites. Daisy was screaming, crumpled in a heap as an electric rain dripped down on her. A screeching noise rose from the battered ride, winding up into an old-fashioned song that was so out of tune it sounded like something from a nightmare. The horses were moving, lurching forward then halting, all the while a deafening, grinding roar emanated from the machinery beneath them. Daisy! Cal ran for the steps, but Brick was already there, hoisting the girl in one arm and Adam in the other. He almost fell as he clattered back down, his face twisted into a grimace. Jade was legging it, her hands over her head. There was a second explosion, this time from overhead. Cal looked up to see the big wheel shake, unleashing a monsoon of dirt and dust and metal shavings so thick it turned the day into twilight. One of the few remaining carriages tore loose, crashing into the booth that sat below it and firing out another deadly barrage of broken glass. The structure juddered, squealing so loudly that Cal slammed his hands to his ears. Daisy squirmed free of Brick's grip and ran over to him, hugging him tight. What is it? She sobbed. What is it? From the other side of the park, there was an almighty crunch, wood splintering, an ugly fist of smoke thrust up towards the sky. Cal could hear more music now, coming from everywhere, 100 different tunes that clashed with each other. It was so loud and so confusing that it was making him feel seasick. And there was laughter too, laughter and applause like in a game show, like there was a crowd watching them. This was what terrified him the most, because it was an impossible sound. It had no right to be here. Chris was yelling at him, pointing at the pavilion, but the hurricane of noise swept his words away. The carousel was spinning faster now. The horses looked wild, like they were about to leap right off the platform and stampede through the park. They looked as if they were coming alive. The whole park was coming alive. Cal suddenly understood what Chris was yelling. Marcus, Cal said. He saw Brick's confusion and shouted, It's Marcus! He must have got the electrics working! The what? Brick called back, dropping Adam to the floor. He broke into a run, heading for the back of the park. Stupid, stupid idiot! The big wheel shuddered hard, another wave of dark matter spiralling down from its skeletal frame, along with half a dozen metal spikes which thudded into the path. A siren rose up, a blaring air raid noise that was coming from the pavilion. It's okay, Daisy, Cal said. The girl was clinging on to him so hard it hurt. He could feel her body shaking. It's just the electricity, it's come back on. They're going to hear it, she said. They're going to hear it and they're going to come and kill us. They're not. They won't. There's no one close enough. He prayed that he was right. If he wasn't, if people came to investigate, then they were all in serious trouble. Daisy looked up at him. But I can see it, Cal, in my head. They're going to come. The carousel lurched, the mirrors on the central post shattering. One of the horses jolted so much that its post snapped, the plastic animal bending out at an angle as it rotated. The pole caught on the pile of rubble next to it, peeling the horse from its mount and depositing it on the ground. Cal grabbed Daisy and pulled her away. It's going to be okay. Brick will sort it out. Another shower of sparks ripped from the top of the carousel, dropping like a curtain. Then the machine ground to a halt. The tune got slower and deeper before dying out completely. Gradually, the rest of the chaos passed, leaving the park quieter than it had ever been. Cal straightened, breathing a sigh of relief like a tornado had just passed overhead. His heart felt like it had received a sudden surge of electricity too, palpitating. He put a hand to his chest to steady it. Adam had run over and was gripping Daisy with the same force that she was holding Cal. "Are you all right?" he asked them. "You didn't get hit by glass or anything, did you?" They both shook their heads. Daisy was looking at something that nobody else could see, her eyes flicking back and forth. Her skin had gone so pale that it was almost translucent. "It's just in your head," he said, stroking the hair away from her eyes. "Don't let it scare you." "But I can see it," she said. "They're going to..." And that's when the screaming started. I can't remember why. Daisy, Furyville, 4:07 p.m. The scream... they were coming from the pavilion, muffled screams that were somehow louder than the deafening chaos that had just faded. Daisy clung on to Cal's arm, her head a constantly churning madness of ice cubes. "Who is that?" said Cal as another shriek tore through the air. Even the birds had stopped singing, as if they were afraid of what was to come. The scream was nothing like the ones in the movies. It was desperate and broken and insane and weak and strong all at the same time. It made the inside of Daisy's skull tickle, the blood in her ears roaring like there was an ocean flowing through them. Adam was crying into her chest, his skinny arms locked around her. Cal swore, running his hands through his hair. Chris was behind them, ghost-like. Neither of them knew what to do. "Wait here," Cal said to him. "Make sure they're safe." "No, man, we should stick together," Chris said. "If it's the ferals, we shouldn't split up." Cal nodded, prying Daisy loose. "OK, stick with me, yeah? Stay close and keep hold of Adam." He looked at Chris. "Grab a weapon, mate. We might need them." Both the boys scrabbled in the rubble, picking up metal poles of different lengths. Cal tucked his beneath his arm, taking Daisy's hand and leading her towards the pavilion, just as another awful screech pierced the walls. They ran past the locked main entrance, almost bumping into Jade as they tore around the corner. "Are you okay?" Cal asked her. Was that you screaming?" She shook her head, turning her wide eyes to the fire door. Daisy heard a scuffling of feet, and Brick appeared from the other direction. He was holding Marcus by the scruff of the neck, and he looked angrier than Daisy had ever seen him. They marched down the side of the pavilion, Brick giving Marcus a shove. The younger kid fell, sprawling in the dirt. "That's Rilke," Brick said. The screams were louder here, squeezed from the fire door as if they were trying to escape whatever was inside. An ice cube clinked to the top of the pile, the restaurant, in a shape that moved inside it, bright and dark at the same time. "Oh, don't go in, please don't go in." "What's happening in there?" Jade asked. "Whatever it is," Brick said. "I hope she's screaming in pain." Marcus was on his feet again. "It started when the electricity came on," he said. "Sorry, by the way, I didn't think all that would happen. We should..." Cal had to stop as more screams tore the air in two. "Come on." "Are you serious?" Brick asked, moving in front of the fire door. "Let her suffer." "We don't know what it is," Cal said, toe to toe with the taller boy. "For all we know, it could be another one of us in there, someone who wandered in when we were out front. Rilke might be doing something to them. You think about that?" Brick obviously hadn't, because after chewing on it for a second, he stood to one side. "We might even be able to grab some food while we're up there," Cal went on, "if she's distracted." He looked at Chris, nodding. Chris nodded back, his metal bar raised. Then the two of them ducked into the darkness. Brick cursed, following them in on his hands and his knees. Daisy looked down at Adam. He was shaking his head, still crying. "Don't be scared," she said. "We're safer if we're all together. They'll look after us." He resisted for a second, then let her lead him to the door. She crouched down, squeezing through the gap. After the blazing sunlight, the corridor was extraordinarily dark. She couldn't breathe under the weight of the shadows, but when she turned to try and escape, Adam was in the way, Jade already pushing through from outside. A shriek echoed down the corridor, so much louder now, so much more real. Daisy opened her mouth, a scream of her own rising fast, cut off when she felt a hand on her shoulder. "Come on," said Cal. "Stay with me." They huddled together as they passed through the dust-thick light of the foyer and up the stairs. The restaurant was in sight when the next stream cannoned out, the doors rocking in their frames with the force of it, flakes of ice spiralling to the frozen floor. "What the—" said Brick. "We should get out." "While we still can," Daisy thought. She realised they were all thinking it. There was a crunch from inside. There was a crunch from inside Waves, the restaurant. Something big slammed into the other side of the wall, a huge crack splitting the plasterwork and making them all stagger back. Marcus almost tumbling down the stairs. A cry howled out with heartbreaking strength. "Sheila!" "Oh, whatever's happening, she deserves it," said Brick, retreating. "She can go to hell for all I care." Crunch. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Rilke called out her brother's name again. "Screw this," Cal said, taking a step back. Daisy thought he was going to leave, but he was just getting a run-up. He threw himself at the doors, yelling as he kicked out. The wood splintered, but they didn't open. He did it again, and this time they flew apart to reveal a world turned inside out. There was light in the restaurant, a flickering glow that was definitely fire, but which was too cold and too bright for a candle. In its uncertain grip, Daisy could see that the restaurant had been trashed, every single table and chair upturned, most splintered into pieces. There was barely a patch of floor that wasn't covered in rubbish. Rilke knelt in the middle of the room as though she was praying. Her legs folded beneath her. The flames were reflected in her wide, unblinking eyes and in the rivulets that ran down her cheeks, making her look like someone burning up from the inside. Her mouth gaped open. Without warning, the scream came again. Not from Rilke, but from something else. It was like a needle sliding into Daisy's brain. Adam let go of her, collapsing to his knees with his fingers in his ears, and it took all her strength not to do the same. The source of the light was moving fast, the shadows in the room sweeping in wide arcs. A shape flew across the restaurant, bathed in weak flames. It thumped into the far wall and dropped to the floor, struggling like a dying bird. It wouldn't stay still, launching itself into the air again before Daisy could make any sense of it. It ploughed through an upside-down table, blasting it into splinters before flailing out of sight. "Rilke!" Cal yelled into the room. "Get out of there!" Her head swivelled around, staring right at them. Daisy understood that Rilke wasn't scared. There was something else in her expression, part fear, yes, but part sick, gleeful excitement too. It was utterly insane. She smiled at them, a grin that belonged in a madhouse. All the while the fire moved, chasing shadows as it hurled itself from wall to wall. "Rilke!" Cal said again, his voice an empty husk. "Don't you see?" the girl called back. The shape dropped in front of her, the flames dulled now, but still covering it like a flickering blue skin. It was a body, its arms wrapped around itself, its legs splayed out at unnatural angles like they were broken. Its head was tucked into its chest, but Daisy had no difficulty working out who it was. Schiller. The boy arched his back, his mouth splitting open and unleashing another scream. The inferno raged, too bright to look at. He thrust himself from the ground so fast that he slammed into the ceiling. One of the panels snapped loose, crashing down beside Rilke. She didn't even notice it, her eyes locked on her brother as he flapped upside down against the top of the room, as if gravity had suddenly been reversed. He slid out of sight, and Daisy found herself taking a step forward. Her terror was now so extreme that she could barely feel it. It could no longer register. She felt Cal's hand around hers, both of them walking through the door together, because they had to see. They had to know what this thing was. Schiller was rolling against the ceiling now, looking like he was trying to put out the flames which burned from his skin. That fire gave off no heat, and it didn't spread. It did the opposite, in fact, leaving sparkling crystals of ice wherever it touched. It was sucking the warmth from everything, feeding on heat and light, devouring it. He cried out again, ripped from left to right, and slammed into the far wall. Rilke's brother wasn't the only shape in the flames, Daisy realised. There was something else there, faint but unmistakable. Unmistakable but impossible. Impossible but real. It stretched out from Schiller's hunched shoulders, unfolding gracefully, longer than the boy's whole body. It swept down with incredible force, blasting debris from the floor and propelling him across the room. Schiller screamed again. The sound cut dead as he struck the other wall, hanging there like a rock climber as that shape beat frantically. It was a wing. A single, flaming, beautiful, terrible wing. "Don't you see?" Rilke said again, still looking at them. The flames flickered, fading again, and Schiller collapsed to the floor. He cried out, trying to crawl towards his sister before disappearing inside another inferno, that same swan-like wind pushing from his back, hauling him into the air. Rilke laughed as she watched him go, a sound like cut glass. "Isn't it obvious what we are?" the girl went on. "What we're becoming, what we're meant to do?" Nobody answered. How could they? Schiller flapped towards the window, tearing at the boards. Sunlight trickled in, but it had no power here, cowering before the living flame. His single wing beat, and he was hoisted up to the ceiling again, then slammed back to the floor with just as much force. Daisy didn't know how he could still be alive, but he was, his face knotted into a mask of pain, of confusion, as he tried to climb to the window again. "You have to make a choice," said Rilke. "You have to embrace this, embrace our gift, or turn your back on it." She got to her feet, walking unsteadily towards the door. Her hands were held out in front of her, no gun in sight, but she was still dangerous. Daisy knew that she was more dangerous than ever. Her brother railed behind her, drowning in fire. "We're all changing," Rilke said. "We have been chosen. Look at what Schiller is becoming. It will happen to all of us. Don't you see that, Daisy?" And Daisy did see it. It was suddenly clear. Marcus had been right all along, and yet he'd been so wrong too. She looked at Cal, feeling the last of the warmth drain from her, snuffed out. Rilke was telling the truth. They were all going to change. "The ferals, they're not the ones who are possessed," Daisy said, staggering back, wanting to cry but unable to remember how. Cal reached for her, but she stepped out of the way towards the stairs. "They're not the ones with demons inside them," she said. Everyone except Schiller was looking at her, waiting for her to finish, to state what they all now knew. "We are." Revelation time. Brick, Furyville, 4:19 p.m. Tea. Brick couldn't take his eyes off Rilke's burning brother. The boy was quiet again, those blue flames simmering from every pore. He lay on the floor, his head turned up. Even his eyes had ignited, pockets of impossible light. Brick thought he would go mad if he stared into those eyes for too long, the same way you could go blind by looking right at the sun. They weren't Schiller's eyes. They belonged to something else, a form that Brick could almost make out in his shimmering, dancing second skin. Daisy was right. Schiller was possessed. "Daisy, wait!" Cal was yelling after the girl, but she was gone, her footsteps fading. The rest of them stood there, paralysed by the cold fire from Schiller and the intensity of Rilke's gaze. Cal turned to her, his face grey. "You're mad. You're off your goddamned head." But she wasn't. What she was saying made a terrible kind of sense. Brick doubled up, feeling the world begin to come apart. Reality was like a house of cards. Strip away enough of what you know, and the rest of it collapses. "You don't have to listen to me, Cal," said Rilke. "You don't have to listen to me, Cal," said Rilke. She had to pause as Schiller erupted again, like somebody had flicked a gas hob from the lowest setting to the highest. The boys' faces, both his and the one in the flames, howled together as that hideous wing punched out and launched him into another lopsided flight. You just have to use your eyes. Look at what he is. Listen to your head and tell me that you don't feel it too. "Don't listen," Brick ordered himself. But it was there, lodged in his brain, an inescapable truth that seared through everything else. There was something inside him the same way there was something inside Schiller, inside all of them, fighting its way to the surface. It had started with a headache, that maddening thump, 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 thump. The noise had been something trying to get in, something knocking at his door, and it had succeeded. It was here. I don't know why we were chosen, Rilke went on, fixing her doll's eyes on them all in turn. But we were. Give it time and you'll see. It can't be, said Chris, crumpled against the banister. The others too were shaking their heads. He could see it in their faces, though. He could see that they believed. Demons aren't real, Rilke, Cal said without conviction. This isn't real, it's a... Schiller was clawing at the window again. He ripped away the board, hurling it across the room so hard that it impaled itself in the far wall. Sunlight streamed in, seeming to funnel around the burning shape. The effect was dizzying, making it look as though he was burning inside a pocket of darkness. Rilke smiled. These aren't demons, she said. I don't know why we're here, but it isn't for something evil. It's for something good, something incredible. What? Asked Jade, her red-rimmed eyes swimming. Don't you see, Rilke said. After everything that's happened to you, isn't it clear? Brick screwed his eyes shut, fighting the swell of emotion that churned up from his gut. He saw the people at the garage, grunting and howling and barking like mindless animals as they chased him. These were the people he had hated for so long, who had hated him, the idiotic, annoying masses who'd been making his life a misery since long before all this had started. Wasn't it right that they should be punished? Not Lisa, though. Not her. She hadn't hated him. Don't fight it, Brick, said Rilke. You know what we have to do. He could feel her thoughts in his own, planting a seed in the flesh of his brain. He knew what she wanted, and it felt so right, so pure. It felt more real than any other thought he'd had in his life. People were bad. People did terrible things. Humanity needed to be purged. He recoiled at the thought, his mind fighting it. That couldn't be right. That wasn't right. Rilke had made a mistake. Don't resist it, she said, her whisper detonating inside his head, a shock that swept away his reason. You can't say no, Brick. It's why we're here. It's what we have to do. He felt something warm and wet trickling from his nose, the taste of salt and copper on his tongue. Don't listen to me. Listen to them, Rilke said. Listen to what they're trying to tell you. It was trying to tell him something, whatever it was that sat inside his soul. There were no words, just an instinctive feeling which burrowed upwards. We've been chosen, yes, but not for this, for something else. You're wrong, he said, his voice faint and distant, like a muffled recording of himself. That's not it. It is, she hissed. If you don't see it, then you're no better than the rest of them. If you don't understand, then you'll die with the rest of them. Schiller screamed, the flames fading like a broken jet engine. He collapsed, his second skin flickering on and off, only the fiery sockets of his eyes still fierce. What we are is a miracle, Rilke said. What lives inside us is holy. It's right. Those of you who accept it will be saved. Those of you too blind and too scared to comprehend what is happening will perish. You have to make a choice right now, or it will be too late. But what is inside us, Rilke? Asked Jade, taking a step towards the other girl. Blood dripped from her nose, and her eyes were wide, innocent, trusting. Jade, said Cal. Rilke, just let her be. I want to know, Jade said. Don't you? Isn't that... She gestured into the restaurant, but she couldn't find the words to describe what she saw. Isn't that proof enough? Cal wiped a hand across his face, smearing away crimson tears. What are they? These things inside us? Jade asked again. You already know, Rilke said. You all do. Jade smiled like somebody hypnotised. She glanced at Cal, then at Chris, and finally at Brick. He thought he could see right into her head, into the broken pieces of her mind. Then she walked into the restaurant, collapsing to her knees in the middle of the room. Come on, yelled Cal. He grabbed Adam's arm, dragging the boy towards the stairs. Let's go. Brick didn't move. He wanted nothing more than to be outside, to be away from this madness, but still Rilke's voice clamoured inside his skull, utterly wrong and yet utterly convincing. He looked at Schiller, bathed in flames. Was this his fate too if he stayed? Could he really walk away from such a gift? "Last chance, Cal," said Rilke, calling down the sweeping stairs. "Screw you, Rilke," he shouted back. "Go to hell." Chris was already stumbling after him, but Marcus wasn't moving. His face wore the same look of rapture as Jade's. "Last chance, Harry," Rilke said to Brick, and the sound of his real name sent a surge of poisonous euphoria vomiting up his throat. He almost threw himself to his knees right there, ready to embrace her. "Listen to their call," she said. "Make your choice." He took a step towards her. Marcus was moving too, laughing softly to himself as he pushed into the restaurant and knelt down before Schiller. "You know what they are," Rilke said. "How can you say no?" Brick opened his mouth and let out a hoarse, desperate scream, a noise that seemed to come not from him but from the thing inside him. Then he turned, falling over himself and crawling backwards towards the stairs, tumbling down the first few before he recovered. He slid down them, never taking his eyes off Rilke. She shook her head, her expression drenched in a profound sadness. "How could you say no?" she asked again. Then she closed the restaurant door. Brick turned and ran, tearing through the foyer and down the corridor, pushing through the fire door so hard that the chains ripped out a lock of his hair. He fell in the dirt, his body shivering in the blazing sun. And all the while the truth of it was a beacon inside his skull, burning with white heat. The thing inside him issuing a clarion call that he could not ignore. No, not a thing, not a ghost or a demon either. It was an angel. Okay, we'll keep going. How are we doing? Yeah, half an hour. We'll probably get a few more chapters in. I think that's my kids I can hear screaming. I hope they're playing. They are around. You'll probably hear them at some point. Who knows what they're doing? Okay. Angels. Maybe. We don't know yet. Cal, Furyville, 4:42 p.m. Cal caught up with Daisy by the carousel, calling out until she staggered to a halt. When she looked round, it was as though she didn't see him, as though the burning boy had blinded her. "Daisy," he said, running over, wrapping his arms around her. She blinked, her eyes swimming in and out of focus, and eventually finding him. He held her tight. He didn't know what to say. After a moment or two, he heard heavy footsteps on the gravel, Chris walking down the path, Adam treading on his shadow. Daisy saw them too. She peeled away from Cal's grip and ran to Adam, hugging him. He didn't react. He didn't even seem to notice she was there. "Tell me Marcus and Brick didn't go in," Cal said. Chris shook his head. "Marcus, yeah. Brick's back there, puking his guts up." Cal put his hands in his hair, clenching so hard it hurt. He wanted to rip off the top of his head, pull out the memories of everything that had just happened. It didn't even matter if it killed him. Better dead than this. "What happened in there, Cal?" Chris said. "What was wrong with that boy?" "He's not a boy," Cal thought. "Not anymore. He's something else." But he wouldn't let himself say what, even though the word flashed up before him like a signal flare in the darkness of his thoughts. He didn't need to speak because Chris plucked it right out of his head. "Angels," the boy said. "That's insane, man." "Oh, forget it," spat Cal. "Yeah, just forget it. Forget that you saw a boy covered in fire flying around the restaurant. It's not important." He ran back the way he'd come, turning the corner to see Brick on his hands and knees outside the door. He wasn't being sick. He was sobbing, which was 1,000,000 times worse. Cal went to him, putting a hand on his back. Brick glanced up, his face so pale that his freckles looked like pen marks. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. They saw in each other's eyes the truth of what Rilke had told them. "Come on, mate," Cal said eventually, holding out his hand. Brick took it, hauling himself to his feet. They had taken a dozen steps back towards the carousel before he let go. Cal collapsed on the steps, the same place they'd been sitting only a few minutes ago, but which was now on the other side of time. He put his head in his hands, trying not to think. Brick sat down next to him. "What?" "Don't," Cal interrupted Chris before he could finish. "If they didn't talk about it, then maybe it might not have been real. Don't say it, Chris. Not now, not ever." "But we have to." We don't, Cal snapped, looking up. Chris was sitting on the path. Daisy and Adam were next to him, both of them staring at nothing. Look, there's something weird going on, sure, something we don't understand, but I can promise you this. Rilke doesn't have a clue what it is either. She's just guessing like us, which is why everything she says is total bull. Nobody argued, but nobody looked very convinced. Jade, Marcus, they'll see that soon enough. They'll be back. And we need to keep our heads screwed on, straight, yeah? We can't afford to start falling apart now. So what do we do? Asked Chris after a moment. We're all exhausted. We've all been through more in a few days than anyone should have to go through in their whole life. None of us has eaten much. We're probably all bordering on crazy anyway. That was no hallucination, said Brick. I'm not saying it was, but it was dark in there, yeah? And I don't know. We just need to stick to the plan. We need to get some food. We'll be able to think of something when we've had a chance to eat, yeah? He looked around. Chris was nodding. Brick shrugged. The idea of going for food seemed alien to Cal. The idea of doing anything seemed alien to him now. But they had to do something, or fall back into the madness of what they'd just seen. I need to get the hell away from this place anyway, Brick croaked. I never want to come back here again. Daisy? Cal asked. She seemed to stir, her eyes drifting up. I want to go home, she said. I know, we all do. Just not yet, not yet. They sat there, listening to the ocean running its ceaseless course against the shore. Even the gulls had fallen silent. So, what is the plan? Chris asked. We get the car, Cal replied. Your car. We go to the factory. We'll work out the rest when we get there. They were out of the park in 5 minutes. As soon as Cal squeezed free from the laurel hedge, he felt the warmth of the day settle back inside him. It was brighter out here, like the park had been drowned in shade, caught beneath the weight of a dirty big cloud. It was easier to forget. He held up a branch so that the others could push through, Daisy and Adam first, then Chris and Brick. He could hear them all taking a sigh of relief when they stepped into the shimmering haze of the empty street. Maybe someone will have fixed it, Daisy said as they started walking along the front of the park. Maybe people won't hate us anymore. And it was tempting to believe it. Something in the fresh sea breeze that curled over the fence, ruffling their hair, which made it seem like everything might be okay. It was an illusion, of course, a fantasy, but it still felt good. Maybe, Cal said. I guess we'll find out soon enough. He looked up, seeing Brick's graffiti on the Fursville sign. The glaring face looked down at him with its dead X eyes, making him shudder. What if they got to the factory and it was full of people? What if they got trapped? One mistake is all it would take for them all to die. But the alternative was worse. The alternative was going back up to the restaurant and falling to their knees in front of Rilke and her burning brother. They reached the car park and walked through the damaged section of fence. The Jag was rammed into the hedge behind the shed, its tail end glinting through a mask of branches, its boot still open. At least it would be fast, he thought. If they had to make a getaway in a Punto or a Fiesta, they'd definitely be screwed. Brick jogged ahead, pulling away the foliage. You got the keys? Brick asked. Chris patted his pockets, pulling a face. Oh, you're kidding me, Brick said. Yeah, I'm kidding you, said Chris, pulling out the fob and unlocking the car. Calm down. Brick's expression was so sour that Cal couldn't help but laugh, Daisy too, chuckling into her hand. Seriously? Brick asked. You think this is funny? Just your face, mate, said Cal. And God, did it feel good to smile again. Yeah? Well, see if you're still giggling when your face is under my backside, Brick stuttered, the stupid insult making them all laugh harder. Oh, just shut up, he said. But his eyes showed a glimmer of light. You know what I mean. Come on, said Cal, pushing the boot shut, before Brick sits on my face. Shall I drive? Said Chris, jiggling towards the car and sliding behind the wheel. My car, my rules. Shotgun! Cal and Brick yelled together, both of them making a break for the passenger door. Brick got there first, ripping it open and diving in head first. He manoeuvred his gangly body around, extending 2 middle fingers towards Cal. Looks like all the babies are in the back, he said with a grin as Cal kicked the door shut. Up yours, he said. He held the rear door open so that Daisy and Adam could clamber inside, getting in after them and planting his knees into Brick's seat. The bigger boy's response was to slide his chair all the way back. Hey, no fair, Cal yelled. Chris, tell him. Behave, said Chris, starting the engine. I'm not going anywhere until you stop messing around and put your seatbelts on. That did it. All of them doubled over with laughter. Even Adam, caught up in the sudden surge, his eyes shining. It could go on forever, Cal thought. This golden light which melted up through each fibre of his body, which made every single particle in the car seem to glow. It wasn't coming from him. It was flowing from somewhere else, a current of warmth which spread from him to Daisy to Adam to Chris to Brick and back again. Whatever this thing was inside them, it was healing them. It would keep them strong and it would keep them safe. Cal wiped the tears from his eyes, his cheeks aching. He looked at the others, and in that moment of quiet they seemed to know each other, like they'd been together for an eternity. "You ready?" he asked. They all nodded. Chris put the Jag in reverse, revving the engine. "Then let's do this." Rilke, Furyville, 5:15 p.m. Rilke could hear the faint growl of a car engine, rising and then fading. She knew who it was. She could almost see it through Daisy's eyes, the 5 of them inside the big silver car, the fat boy driving. They were laughing. Laughing. The sound of it, echoing almost silently through her thoughts, made her blood boil. She knew where they were going, too. She could pluck that thought out of the storm of emotions inside their minds as easily as taking a sweet from a bag. It was a sign that whatever was inside her was growing in strength. It had to be. Soon she'd be like Schiller, gripped with a holy fire and ready to burn down the world. He sat before her now, and even though he was no longer a light, even though he was slumped and loose-limbed like a marionette with its strings cut, she could feel the energy pulsating from him. He was still cold, the carpet beneath him a lake of ice. He stared at the floor with 2 sets of eyes, the old eyes she knew so well, and 2 pits of fire which sat over them, shimmering gently. Marcus and Jade were there too. They were both on their knees, gazing at Schiller as though they had just seen the face of God. That wasn't too far from the truth, she guessed, except they both had this same gift. It just hadn't been opened yet. They all had it. She'd seen it inside the man with the shotgun, the one she'd killed, a creature of flame inside him which had died when he died. The ones who had fled had it too. She was disappointed that so many had run from their responsibility. It was no surprise that Brick had gone, Cal too, blinded by his own self-righteousness. But she had wanted Daisy to stay. Of all of them, Schiller aside of course, Daisy was closest to changing, to becoming what they were all destined to become. Jade turned round. Her eyes were wide and wet, her copper-coloured hair like a pyre in the sunlight from the broken window. She was the kind of weak creature that Rilke would usually hate, but she had been chosen too. She was her sister now, as much as Schiller was her brother. "What are we, Rilke?" Jade asked. "Angels," Rilke replied. Jade cocked her head, her mouth hanging open. It seemed an age before she spoke again. "How can that be?" "Because they've chosen us." Rilke could feel a force inside her stirring as she spoke. It was so small now, but it would grow. "But how can it be?" Jade said. "How is it possible?" "It doesn't matter. I don't think we're supposed to know. The only thing that's important is what we've been asked to do." Schiller groaned. His left arm was hanging at a strange angle. It had been dislocated at the shoulder. "Don't fight it, little brother," she told him, knowing that the words would get through. "You're going to be okay, just don't fight it." "What are we being asked to do?" said Marcus. A trickle of blood was winding down from his ear and he wiped it away with the back of his hand. "I saw it in my head, I think. I saw people, the ones that tried to kill me." "They tried to kill you for a reason," said Rilke, "because they know how dangerous you are." "But why would angels want to hurt people?" Jade said. She was glancing towards the door, frowning like she was stirring from a deep sleep. Now that Schiller had stilled, she seemed to be changing her mind. "Angels are supposed to be good, aren't they?" Rilke spat out a laugh. "What do you think they are? Little cherubs with harps and halos? No, angels are soldiers. They are powerful, and they are cruel." She knew that much from church. "They can't exist here by themselves. They'd burn right through the skin of this place. They need a host, a vessel. They need us." Marcus and Jade looked at each other. If they bolted now, Rilke decided, she'd shoot them both dead before they reached the door. How could they be so ignorant? "Angels are cruel," said Marcus. "No, that's the wrong word," Rilke said. "They're not cruel, but they're not kind either. They have no emotions. They're warriors. They have no love for us. They don't feel anything at all. They've been sent here before to destroy cities. They've killed thousands. If I had a Bible, I'd show you. There's proof. It says the angels will cleanse the world of the wicked." Even as she spoke, She knew the creature inside her was nothing to do with the Bible. It was much, much older than any human stories. Rilke could feel the weight of its age on her soul. But they must have been here before. They must have inspired those stories. That's our job, Jade said, shaking her head. Killing people, it doesn't feel right. Just the bad ones. Don't you see? The world is a horrible place. People do terrible things to each other all the time. Would it be such a bad thing to purge all that rot? As she said it, a sudden doubt took hold of her. She thought back to what she'd seen with Daisy, the man in the storm that hung over the street and howled, which sucked in all that was warm and light, and which spat out only absence. If they were angels, then what had that thing been? One of them? No, not one of us. It isn't one of us, she thought. That thing is the opposite of us. It's here to destroy everything. We have to fight it. We have to fight it. The words in her head were not hers, and she pushed them away. She had to believe that what she was doing was right. If she didn't believe it, then she was lost. You'll see, she said. You won't doubt me for much longer. None of them would. Something incredible was going to happen. Even more incredible than Schiller's transformation. She could feel it the same way she could feel the tickle of a sneeze. She didn't know what, but it would involve fire. She wasn't sure if that premonition had been hers or Daisy's, but it was inevitable. There would be fire, and they would see the truth. And she knew what she had to do to make it happen. I need a phone, she said. Do either of you have one? Battery's dead, said Jade. Marcus fished his from his jeans and examined it. Why'd you want it? He said. Trust me. He obviously did, because he handed it to her. They're going to the factory, aren't they? Rilke asked. To look for food. Jade nodded, her expression uncertain. Rilke dialed 999 and lifted it to her ear. Daisy and the others would soon understand exactly what they had to do, if they survived, that was. There was a click, then a voice asking her which emergency service she required. All of them, she said, smiling. I think there's going to be a terrorist attack. Rilke, what are you doing? Well, I'll stop there actually, because that's probably a good. Yeah, we'll stop there because the next part is. We really don't have that much left to go. We'll probably read this in another couple of days, you know. So it's all going to kick off, I think, at the end of the book. As they head to the factory and Rilke's just called 999. There's going to be a big battle. I do remember this bit. This bit is quite cool. Anyway, I shall leave you to it. I don't know what your plans are for the rest of the day, but I hope they involve lots of fun. And and I will catch up with you hopefully tomorrow, maybe tomorrow Sunday, maybe Monday. We'll definitely finish Monday or Tuesday next week. And then we'll be on to The Storm, which doesn't exist as a physical book. So I'll probably have to read it off my Kindle. Anyway, take care of yourselves. Lovely to see you. I love you guys. Do my pointless salute again. I don't know why I do it. Take care, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.